Hey, welcome to the Publish, Promote, Profit podcast with me, Rob Kosberg. Every week, I interview thought leaders and experts who have used a book to grow their income and their impact. So tune in weekly for these interviews so you can learn how to use your own best-selling book and go from hunting for clients and opportunities to instead being the hunted. All right. Hey, welcome everybody. Rob Kosberg here with another episode of the Publish, Promote, Profit podcast. Really excited to have a great guest, a New York Times bestselling author, Mr. Brant Cooper, the bestselling author of The Lean Entrepreneur and a new book that he has out called Disruption Proof. He's also the CEO of a company called Move the Needle. With over 2 decades of experience helping companies bring innovative products to market, he blends an agile design thinking and lean methodologies to ignite entrepreneurial action within large organizations. He's experienced a lot of really cool milestones, IPO, acquisition, rapid growth, and crushing failure, as all entrepreneurs tend to face. Global keynote speaker, mentor to entrepreneurs. His mission is to teach leaders how to find personal and economic growth through creating new value for humans. Brant, thank you so much for being here with me today, and welcome to the Publish, Promote, Profit podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Rob. Thank you.
Yeah, great to be on with you. As always, excited to talk about kind of 2 paths here. I want to talk a little bit about your magic. You know, I love what you do. I love the idea of lean entrepreneurship. I've always started my businesses, several multi-million-dollar businesses, no IPOs yet, but several multi-million-dollar businesses that were all bootstrapped. Maybe we could start there and talk a little bit about what was the motivation to get you to go down that path, write that lean entrepreneur book in the first place.
Yeah, so prior to that, I lived through the dot-com boom and bust, so the tech startup world up in the Silicon Valley area. And, that's where I experienced some of the trials and tribulations with a little bit of success mixed in as well. But after the bust, there were a number of people that were writing about, well, why are we creating startups so that they look like big businesses? Because the successful startups actually operate differently than the big businesses.
Right.
And so out of that, I actually ended up writing the first book, self-published, called The Entrepreneur's Guide to Customer Development. And it was the first book to talk about things like lean startup and product market fit. And basically the idea was not necessarily to bootstrap, but that's certainly an option. But the word lean really comes from eliminating waste. And it's a throwback to the Toyota production system. So described how Toyota was building cars in Japan in the 50s. And so it's, hey, we're creating this value for customers. How do we not waste resources and not waste money and not waste time? And so the same ideas can be applied to the entrepreneurial world. How do we not waste our time, money, effort, creativity in building products that nobody wants? And so the Entrepreneur's Guide to Customer Development and then the Lean Entrepreneur really got into the tactical. Here's how you can run experiments to validate or invalidate your assumptions. Here's how you test your idea. Here's how you get to know your customers, and doing all of these things in order to hone your business in on what will work in the marketplace and thereby reducing the waste that otherwise you might spend.
Love it. Love it. Oftentimes, it's fun to talk about all the successes and whatnot, but, the crushing failures that you mentioned in the bio, there's oftentimes where the greatest lessons are, right? And so is there a connection, a crushing failure to the lean entrepreneurship type methodology?
There is, but I would even say that in the successful efforts, you can also find those principles, because the successful efforts never started with the success. They always started with failure. Yeah. And so the whole point of the failure is learning from the failure, right? But so the first, the company that I IPO'd with, I joined as the IT manager, and within, 2 or 3 years, they had completely reinvented their entire business model, their products, how they went to market, the technology, everything was new. You could not tell that was the same company. And so you can sort of imagine that there's a number of iterations that happen within that, even that 3-year period, to try to find where the sweet spot was. And so even in a successful business, they succeed because they do that learning from failure. And what you want to try to do by using some of these techniques is fail small So you don't fail big, which is
Yeah.
the crushing failure where you go out of business
Right.
because you didn't ever figure it out.
Right, right. Fail forward fast, as I've heard it said a number of
Yep.
times. I think John Maxwell might have coined that phrase, or perhaps hijacked it from somebody. I'm not sure which one.
Well, there's no original ideas under the sun. It's easy for multiple people to come up with the same phrase.
Well said. Well said. Very nice way of saying it. So tell me about Disruption Proof. That's the newest book. A little bit different than the Lean Entrepreneur, but I'm sure some of the same ideas. Give me the overview of that. Who does that help? How does that work?
Yeah, so Disruption Proof is actually coming out in October, and I'm just doing a lot of my word out now. But basically, for the last 7 years, I've applied these lean entrepreneur type of practices to very large organizations. And talking about a lot of crushing failures, I mean, this is really difficult to try to bring the entrepreneurial spirit into these big companies. And so every step of the way, we learned more. We were doing workshops, and then we learned to extend that, and then we learned to get leadership involved. And so really over the last 6 or 7 years, I believe I won't be so arrogant as to call it a blueprint, but I have some specific ideas that these companies that want to change in their organization, here's a path that they can follow. And here are the principles that they really need to adopt and to spread throughout the company. And so that's really what Disruption Proof is about. It's really how do we empower people to create new value in the world and drive this permanent change that will allow these large enterprises to not only inspire and keep their best employees, but to find revenue growth again and to find their place in really a new age. A lot of these companies are really built upon the industrial age, are structured and managed as if, their business still is an extension of the assembly line.
Yeah.
And yet we're going through this massive change here from an innovation age, digital age. We're all running around with computers in our pockets, and it's fundamentally changing society. And so what we need to do then is change how we're managing and structuring these organizations. And so that's really what Disruption Proof is about, create these organs in such a way that they can handle disruptions like the pandemic or new technological waves. I believe that, if you just look at the amazing amount of stuff that goes on a regular basis, I mean, from the energy grid in Texas to, the insurrection on the Capitol to the Suez Canal now, I mean, these things can massively disrupt our businesses. And so the businesses themselves, this is I call this endless disruption. We're just going to continue to get these waves. And so we have to build our companies so that they're resilient to all of these disruptions. And that's why it's called Disruption Proof. Is how do we create these more resilient organizations in the face of what I think is going to be endless disruptions.
Love that. It's interesting, when you think of disruption, or when I think of disruption, I think of disruptive technologies that come to the forefront and completely destroy, right? Some companies, Netflix destroying and disrupting the video industry and destroying Blockbuster, or the digital camera completely disrupting Kodak, as an example. But it sounds like your take on it is more, disruptive events that happen, and how we can have such a strong, maybe backbone within the business, employees, et cetera, that we can handle any of those kinds of tsunamis that come our way. Is that kind of the idea?
That is the idea. I think that the technology disruption will also continue.
Right.
But I think that we're in the digital age, it makes all of these disruptions that more germane to because of the globalization, because of the power of the computer in our pockets, because of the interconnected nature of all of the companies. It means that, it's sort of that, the cliche of the butterfly in the Amazon, disrupting something on the other side of the world. You can actually see it now. You can see it happening, that these small disruptions that happen somewhere else can actually affect our global supply chains.
Right.
And so I think that the technology disruptions will continue, but I think fundamentally this change from the industrial age to the digital age means that all of the structures of our institutions, education, government, nonprofits, startups, and big businesses is just fundamentally going to change. And it means that how we think about these businesses running and how we manage people, it also must fundamentally change.
That's interesting. I guess maybe a question that I have is, let's use one of those massive disruptions that I mentioned, like let's say Blockbuster and Netflix, which is a technological disruptive force. Is the idea that, maybe there was within the ranks of Blockbuster a number of people that saw this coming, but because perhaps they didn't have a culture of great communication, or perhaps there were stifling voices and competition that never got up to a decision-making level. Is that kind of the idea? Like that right culture can even help against disruptive technology?
Yeah, I think that that's right. I mean, what's interesting, Rob, is that there's a lot of mythology around those disruptions. And Netflix and Blockbuster is one, but the Kodak and the digital is another. The fact of the matter is that the Blockbuster officers did know, and that they actually did take these initiatives to try to go online and to try to look at other business models. And what's interesting about it is that it's not really the streaming that broke them. It was mail order that broke them, which is kind of funny because that's not really technology disruption at all, right? I mean, mailing out discs is not like this crazy revolutionary idea, but they tried that as well. And there was a bunch of C-level activities that went on, including trying to buy the business and selling the business. And there was a bunch of C-level executive moves that went on where the wrong bets were made, the wrong moves were made. And so to me, that does represent exactly what you're talking about. It's sort of the digital age that sort of means that the arrogance of the top-down decision maker, like I know because I'm at the top of the company, so I'm right, is the wrong mentality in the digital age.
Right.
And what you need really is this grassroots level, this ground up behavior change where you're running experiments and you're actually gathering evidence that says this particular business model will work. You need hundreds, if not thousands of those experiments running in order to maybe capture the lightning that is going to succeed.
Yeah.
And the same exact thing happened with Kodak. Kodak invented it and they did bring it to market, but they chose a business model that failed.
Yeah.
And so it's too easy to say that they just missed the boat. I mean, most companies, if you just one idea and you try to execute on it, you're going to fail. You have to launch multiple ideas. There was probably 999 startups that also failed and one succeeded, right? Yeah. And so it's the same sort of thing. You have to run multiple experiments in order to try to figure out what's working. And so the empower people part of my subtitle is really this idea of Agile. And I'm sure you're familiar with Agile practices, but you're actually forming these teams. You give them a mission, and then you give them the authority to go figure out the right way it is to accomplish the mission. And so if you have an organization that is structured around empowering employees to go figure out how to solve problems, listen, we hire these people because they're smart people,
right?
And then we tell them what to do. Yeah. And so we want to flip that. We actually want to say, we're hiring you smart people, and now I want you to go figure out how to solve this particular problem. That's your mission.
Right.
And so the information then is flowing up, and we have to, there's a bunch of hard work that has to be done in order to manage that. The hierarchy still exists to a certain extent, though it's way flatter. We have to get the communication horizontally. So it's still very difficult, but it's a fundamental change of the way we're thinking. It's a fundamentally different mindset than sort of this hierarchical command and control, top down, you go do this. The latter works when we know everything.
Right.
The former works when we're facing uncertainty. And that's the world that we live in my opinion. These endless disruptions mean that we face a world that's increasingly complex and filled with uncertainty. And so we have to work differently.
I love it. I wonder as well, I have 3 kids, 2 of them are millennials. They're all 3 in the workforce. One is I think Zoomer. Is that what he's 20? He's the baby. And it certainly seems like, just from knowing my kids and also having employees that are a few that are in their early 20s, that there is an expectation that is significantly different than I'd say my generation was on how to approach the corporate culture and what they expect from the corporate culture. Do you think is that a product of the digital age? Is that just something that we've seen come along maybe because of, even a rebellion or transition away from the previous culture that was a little bit more top-down, heavy-handed even? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it probably does change. I think that there was lots of people that saw this before and wanted to work in this way. I guess I think that society sort of reaches these different tipping points where suddenly people with that sort of ethos become sort of the majority, or not the majority, but maybe the largest group within. Yeah. And so then you start seeing these changes. I think that growing up with digital and the amount of information, again, that they carry around in their pocket fundamentally changes that. I know, I'm guessing with your kids, but my kids certainly a similar age, they're interacting with people that are strangers on the other side of the world since they were very young. And so sort of the old people bemoan everybody with their devices in their pockets and the kids doing this and that and chatting. But if you look at the flip side of that, the fact is that their social structures are way more complex and global than what we grew up with. And so I think that their synapses are connecting, their neurons are connecting in just completely fundamental ways. And so, I think the behavior has changed. And sort of the cliche of them wanting to live more experiential lives is part of that. And so it makes them, I think, more entrepreneurial. And I think it means that, if they are confident and they believe that they're smart people, then they want to exercise their intelligence. We are natural creative people. We're naturally problem solvers. And so they want to figure that stuff out. It doesn't mean they won't make mistakes, but that's where we get back to that fail forward, fail fast, right? Is that mistakes are fine if you're learning from them and you're able to iterate quickly in order to find the right way to go. So I do think that there's this sea change, but I guess I'll also say that, the vast majority of leaders that we've worked with in some of these big companies are eager, willing, and able to change. Like they're able to see that these are the new skills that are required, and they can develop empathy and learning how to empower their people, which I've actually struggled with. I think it's really hard, but you can learn how to do these things. And suddenly you get this exponential.
That kind of culture, I would imagine people want to stay a part of and be a part of.
I totally agree with that. And studies have certainly shown that. I allude to a couple of those studies in my book. People worry about money after they feel like they're not getting what they want, sort of, who they are as a human being out of their job. That's when they start focusing on the money part of it. Sort of the empowerment and the feeling of being inspired and trying to create good in the world and having a role, those things are way more important.
That's good. Boy, that's really good advice. I'm going to, as you're talking, I'm thinking about our different teams. We have our PR department, we have our book launch department, obviously our ghostwriting team, editing, all of that. And I'm thinking through as you're talking about, okay, what do we need to change here? How can we make sure that they're really, excited and bringing their creativity to their job and their role?
Yeah, I think, and what's interesting to me is that in this remote world, right, if you're now running a virtual company, we talked about briefly that middle managers often struggle in that role because normally what they think of is, one-on-ones and staying on top of people that report to them. And my advice really is to create an agile team out of those people. And, the agile is really, people can go to agilemanifesto.org to learn about the principles of agile. But it's really about creating a team where they hold each other accountable. And so the team isn't as weak as the weakest link. The team actually strengthens the weakest link. And they hold each other accountable to the behavior and to the culture and to the values of the company without a manager having to stay on top of them.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that middle managers always want is this ability to become proactive rather than reactive. And if you actually can get your team to function in a way that organized and they're autonomous and they're actually accomplishing without sort of micromanagement or staying on top of them, suddenly, if that works, then suddenly middle management becomes proactive and they can start thinking more strategically and ensuring that what they're in charge of, the missions that they're in charge of, are aligned to your missions, to the company's mission. And again, so suddenly the management, their creativity is unleashed. They become more empowered and they become more satisfied at work. So you really can create a virtuous cycle.
Love it.
Out of that, I think.
Love it. And become disruption proof, as they say.
Hopefully true.
You've obviously helped a lot of people with your writing as a best-selling author, with your speaking, etc. And, I obviously love books. I love the kind of impact that they can make on people for just $20. But what I also like to talk about is the kind of impact they've made on the authors that have written them. And so maybe we can switch gears for just a second, Brant, and tell me about your journey as an author. What has authoring these books done for your business, done for your brand? And I mean, specifically, does it get you speaking engagements? Have you seen, your ability to bring in new clients and all of those things change because of this impact that you're making on others that's attracting people to you?
Yeah, it's sort of not an exaggeration to say that the book has done everything for me. The books have done everything for me. Now, the first book that I wrote actually was, a few years out of college. I sort of dropped out and wrote, the great American novel, which was American, but not great. And so it was another, 25 years or something after that when I wrote The Entrepreneur's Guide to Customer Development. But so there was, I sort of caught that lightning in a bottle. We were in the right place at the right time with a very well-defined market segment. People that were, mostly startups, familiar with Steve Blank's work and Eric Ries's work and a number of other people that were talking about these type of things. And we literally treated our book as if it were a business startup. And so this is where I think a lot of authors get trapped, is they want to view their book as art rather than as a startup product. And so back when we did the first book, CreateSpace had just been bought by Amazon, and they were just kind of rolling out Kindle tools. And we self-published it and created a Kindle version and a PDF version and a print-on-demand version. And we put those in their own separate templates so that we could ensure that the layouts were right for whatever different device that people might read them on. We were one of the first people to put live tweets inside of our book. And so all of that is that comes from our product background in startups. That doesn't come from, authoring. And, we even had a SaaS style landing page where we were selling the PDF, where people could buy bundles, they could buy other tools, they could buy a talk from us. And so that's sort of this number one, is to think about this as it's a startup, and this is a product in the startup. And so what did that get me? Well, even that first self-published book, speaking gigs around the world, and got me my first consultant clients. So really just literally launched a new career for me. I'm not exaggerating. It launched a new career for me. And again, so much of it is just me being in the right place at the right time and fortune. I'm a fortunate person and privileged in many ways. And so there's a bunch of, but that's the way the world works. You got to be in the right place at the right time. Timing is everything. And so, we took advantage of that. And then we had publishers coming to us. So the second book I published was with a traditional publishing house. But again, authors make the mistake of thinking that's like, oh, well, the publisher, man, that's like, everything's taken care of for you, right? And it's like, no.
Not even close.
They don't do anything, to be honest.
Yeah, the traditional publishing houses expect you to go sell your book.
That's right. And so we did the exact same thing. We created a promotional video. We had our landing page. And of course, instead of us selling it ourselves because we had sold the rights, we pushed everything to the bookstores. But basically, I spent 2 years in between the two books, the whole time reselling my new book and learning what needed to be in the new book by doing workshops and speaking engagements. So again, it's very much more like that was the second product of our startup than it was, oh, I'm authoring a book through a traditional publishing house.
Yeah.
The traditional publishing house just means that's just your distribution channel inside your startup, right?
Yeah.
And so then after that, I published somebody else's work through my publishing press. And, that one was probably a little bit less successful because I didn't really have the money to spend on the promotional part, right? And then this next book is through Hachette, and I'm super proud to be, picked up by Hachette. So I'm going back to the traditional publishing house. But they really gave me a deal because of the platform I had built doing the other methods, right? And so I just, It's brought me clients, it's brought me speaking gigs, it's brought me just this ability to meet and continue to, meet new people and just continue to learn and figure stuff out. And really that all creates the fodder for the next book, right? This stuff doesn't happen inside the building. It doesn't happen around a conference room table. It actually happens from being out there, engaged in the world and experiencing all of the ups and downs and successes and failures so that, hey, can we codify this stuff? So I just think that, I've always heard a bunch of people always tell me, oh, I think I have a book in me. And I kind of just shake my head because it's like, yeah, everybody's got a book in them, but it's getting it out.
Right.
Which is really the differentiator, right? And so to me, that's the thing is like, get the book out or it's just talk. And the differentiating part of all of this is no matter how you do it or what product you end up coming up with, you have to market it, you have to sell it, you have to distribute it. It's on you to do these things, but you have to create the product yourself. You have to go write it down.
Yeah, and that's easier said than done. As you said, I can't tell you the number of people that we've spoken to. And on a regular basis, on a monthly basis, we probably speak to 300 or so people that apply to work with my company. And I would say the vast majority of those people have been wanting to write a book for more than 5 years. And these are successful people. These are not people that are, sitting around twiddling their thumbs. But as you said, the proof is in the doing. What it produces is in the doing. I want to go back to one thing you said, and by the way, thank you so much for sharing it. It's so powerful to hear, how much your books and your writing have done. Very, very encouraging to people. But one thing you mentioned that I don't know if I 100% agree with, but I get it. And that is, you talked about the timing and, you said you were very humble. You said you're a blessed individual and all of that. And I believe that about you. I believe that about me. But I also think, sometimes I'm afraid that people find any reason in the world not to write their book, including, there's already 1,000 books on finance. Do I really need to write another book on finance? Or there's already, 100 books on disruption or marketing or corporate culture, fill in the blank. And oftentimes we'll use an excuse like, I don't know if the timing is right or whatever, to never complete their project. And I certainly don't think that that's what you mean by your timing was right. I think that, your timing could have been right 2 years earlier, or maybe 2 years after, or maybe not. But I think you still would be considered a blessed and humble and, very positive individual by writing it. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that I have been, sort of blessed and I'm fortunate because the timing actually contributed to the success.
Right.
I think that everybody that has something to say should write a book. Absolutely everybody. I think that number one thing that stops people is the self-editing. And so what you're talking about there is actually kind of self-editing. Yep. You can always come up with an excuse for self-editing. Even when people start writing the book, they self-edit.
Yes.
There's so many editors out there. There's so many people that can help you distill your idea. There's so many people that can help you find the thread through your writing that actually is the nugget. And so my number one advice is to schedule a time early in the morning is preferable and do it every day. And you write for that hour or those 2 hours, regardless of whether you have anything to say. You just write, you just get it out, get to a stream of consciousness. It doesn't matter if it's not good. The good comes later. The good comes in the editing. The good comes when, you get help in actually forming that structure. And then there's the business aspect of it that I think I already talked about, right? And so that's also just pure hustle. And so to me, maybe that's where the luck came in, was that my hour, I should say, I had a co-author. And so actually, not to go off topic, but find yourself a co-author. Yeah. It's like, I wrote the book. My partner, Patrick, was really on the marketing and sales side. But he got to be on the book because he was my partner. And so again, it's more like a startup. But anyway, I think that my timing part was true, but that's also what, I hit the New York Times bestseller list. It's hard to do. And so I do think that what's important is that all authors who are viewing this as, sort of their startup founder, be reasonable about what they are trying to achieve. And so not everybody's going to hit the New York Times bestseller list.
Right.
And so what is important to you? What are you trying to achieve? If you want to be considered a thought leader, you don't have to hit the New York Times bestseller list.
That's correct.
So if you want to gain credibility in your market, you do not have to hit your New York Times bestseller list. Those things help, but they're not required. And when you go through a traditional publisher at the same time, you do not make money. And so it's like, if you're in it to make money, then self-publish it and market and sell the heck out of it.
Right.
I mean, I just think that the outcomes need to be aligned. And as much as I would love to be able to promise everybody that they're going to hit a list because they've gone ahead and written it, it just doesn't seem reasonable and it's not aligned in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I don't want to dissuade people from writing a book if they've got something to say because they don't think the timing's right. And I totally agree with you, Rob. That's just an excuse. That's self-editing.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Brant, love talking to you. Love your zeal, both for what you do as well as for the whole idea of creation and especially how that involves books. Tell us, best place to get in touch with you, website, where can people get more information about the stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, I'm Brant Cooper on all social media, and I really encourage people to reach out to me. I'm happy to chat. Brant@brantcooper.com is my email, and you can learn more about Disruption Proof and even order it. You can pre-order now at all of your favorite retailers, but there's some special bundles available at brantcooper.com.
Yeah, I saw that. If someone wants to even have you come out and speak, or things like that, they can buy a certain number of books and get all different, which I love that. I love the creativity of that. That's something that we teach our clients as well to do. And so that's so brantcooper.com. And, you could buy a big enough bundle to have Brant come on over and do a speaking engagement for your corporation, perhaps.
Yeah, I would love to do that. And obviously doing it virtual now, but I can't wait really to get back to meeting people in person and seeing if I could provide value to them. So
love it.
Here's looking to getting our vaccines out there and getting back to the world, right?
Love it. Love it. Brant, thank you again. Thanks for being on Publish, Promote, Profit, the podcast, and great to get to know you, my friend.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Really appreciate it. Great talking to you.
Same.